Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to do something, well, a little bit different. Usually, we take a massive stack of articles or a huge book and just try to wrestle it all to the ground. But today we are zooming way, way in.
Right, like microscope level. It's a micro history that basically opens up a macro universe.
Exactly. We are traveling back in time for this one. I want you to picture the exact date. It's Wednesday, May 3rd, 1967. And the time is exactly 9:45 p.m.
A very, very specific Wednesday evening.
Yeah, and the setting is a living room in Elmira, New York. Just visualize this for a second. It's the late 60s, but we're not at a protest or a music festival. We're in a quiet, domestic setting.
Yep.
There's probably cigarette smoke hanging in the air, since Jane Roberts was a heavy smoker, and the only sound is the scratching of a pen on paper.
And that would be Ruburt, her husband, transcribing every single word by hand.
Right. And we're diving into one highly specific document today. Officially, we are looking at Session 339 of the Early Sessions Book 8 of Seth material.
For anyone who might be new to this, or just joining the deep dive for the first time, the Seth material involves Jane Roberts. She was a writer and a poet who would enter this deep trance state. And in that state, she would speak for an energy personality essence that called himself Seth.
And Robert Butts just sat there and transcribed it all.
Every word. It really is one of the most prolific, well-documented cases of channeled literature in the entire 20th century.
And tonight, well, on this specific night in 1967, the room is actually a bit crowded. They have guests over. Bill and Peg Gallagher are sitting in with Jane and Rob. And the reason we picked this specific session to deep dive into is because it acts almost like a cold case file.
It really does. I mean, it has absolutely everything. It's got medical diagnoses that are just chillingly specific. It has past life regressions to 19th century France. And then it culminates in this mind-blowing moment of remote viewing where consciousness apparently just flies right across the country to California to look at a pink house.
It's basically a greatest hits album of paranormal phenomena. And it's all happening in the span of 1 hour.
It challenges all our definitions of time, space, privacy even. But it does so in a way that is just surprisingly grounded.
But before we really get the engine started and drive into the Twilight Zone here, I do need to do a little bit of housekeeping.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I have to state clearly right up front, this deep dive is being distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. We are here to learn, to explore, and to impartially analyze the data contained in these source documents.
And our mission today is to treat this session almost like a psychic dossier. We want to understand not just what was said, but why those specific images came through. Like, how does a consciousness actually project itself to a town like Chula Vista, California, without physically moving an inch?
And you know what surprised me the most when I was reading through the raw transcript of Session 339? You'd think a seance or a deep trance session would be super spooky, right? Like heavy velvet curtains, solemn whispers, thunder crashing in the background.
Stereotypically, yeah, sure. That's the Hollywood version of it.
But the vibe check for May 3rd, 1967 is surprisingly chill. It's actually really funny.
It is. The session opens with this great banter. You have Bill Gallagher, one of the guests, greeting Seth. Now, imagine you are talking to a disembodied entity from another dimension. What do you even say? Like, oh, great spirit, or hail, traveler.
Take me to your leader, maybe?
Right, but Bill just says, hum-dee-doo.
Hum-dee-doo. I just love that. It is so quintessential 1960s suburban dad. It just completely deflates any tension in the room.
And Seth, who is this ageless, multidimensional entity, doesn't go all Shakespearean or biblical on them. He fires back immediately. He says, our best, as always, to the Jovial Jesuit.
The Jovial Jesuit. That is such a deep cut.
It's a reference to a priest acquaintance of theirs, but it establishes this rapport immediately. It shows that Seth isn't this distant, robotic voice echoing from the void. He's present, he's witty, he's basically part of their social circle.
It sets the stage so perfectly. It's incredibly relaxed. It's just two friends talking to, well, a third friend who just happens to be borrowing his wife's vocal cords for the evening. But then
Boom.
Boom. We pivot from hum-dee-doo to something incredibly precise.
We move right into the report phase of the evening.
Right. And for you listening, we are going to structure this first part exactly like a dossier. We're going to look at the profile Seth builds of a man they just referred to as the old man or the letter writer.
Just to give a little context here, Jane and Rob had received a letter from a man they didn't really know. And Seth decides to essentially tune into this physical letter and profile the author.
Okay, so imagine we are holding this dossier in our hands. I want to break this down point by point because the specific details are where the verification really lies. We're going to treat these like bullet points in an investigation.
Perfect. So let's look at the physical diagnosis bullet points first.
Okay, bullet point 1, the eyes.
Seth says the man has failing eyesight. But then he zooms in way closer. He says, partial cataract in the left eye.
Let's just stop there for a second. Partial cataract in the left eye. That is incredibly specific. He doesn't just say, oh, he wears thick glasses or he squints a lot. He names the actual medical condition and pinpoints the specific eye.
It's a massive high-risk statement. Think about it. If the man had perfect vision, or even if he had a cataract in the right eye, the credibility of the whole session is blown. But Seth is totally emphatic about it.
Moving to bullet point 2, neurology.
Seth mentions a hint of partial paralysis on the left side, and he connects it to his history. He says there is a tremor from an old disorder.
A tremor from an old disorder, that implies a real timeline. It's not just a current symptom popping up, it's a permanent scar from something in his past.
And he adds a third point to the physical list. He says there's a marginal motor disturbance.
So putting this entire physical profile together, you have a man roughly 54 years old who is really physically struggling. He's shaky. One side of his body isn't fully cooperating. He is actively losing sight in his left eye. It paints a pretty heavy picture.
It does. But then we get the psychological and professional profile. And this is where the contrast just becomes fascinating.
Okay, so bullet point 1 on the psych profile, the personality type.
Seth flat out calls him a disordered personality.
Ouch.
Yeah, it sounds harsh. But in the exact same breath, Seth offers a kind of validation. He says this man has quite legitimate psychic abilities, however, fairly well developed.
That is such a weird combination to me. Usually we think of psychic or highly spiritual people as being these perfectly zen, balanced masters. Seth is basically saying, no, this guy is a total mess, but the signal is still coming through loud and clear.
It really taps into that old archetype of the wounded healer or the savant. Sometimes the cracks in the vessel are exactly what let the light in. Seth is making a very clear distinction between the personality, which is the social mask, the ego, the day-to-day behavior, and the ability, which is innate.
Bullet point 2 on the professional side, the career.
This is where it actually gets kind of funny. Seth says he has this missionary fervor. He's running some kind of spiritual school or a congregation.
And what were the numbers on that?
Seth says he has a student body of approximately 200 in name only.
In name only. Oh, man, I feel like I've been to that exact meetup group.
Right. The active core is only about 26 participants. It is such a brilliantly human detail. We all know organizations exactly like that. The mailing list is absolutely huge. The Facebook group has thousands of members. But the people who actually show up to unfold the metal chairs on a rainy Wednesday night, barely 24.
It makes this man feel so incredibly real to me. He's got this grand ambition, this missionary fervor, but his reality is a lot smaller. It's slightly tragic, but also just kind of eccentric.
And Seth wraps up the whole profile by saying he's a well-educated but misunderstood man, and that his childlike tendencies are now in prominence.
Childlike tendencies. That phrase acts as a perfect bridge to the next piece of evidence, which is the physical letter itself.
Yes. Jane is actually holding the letter during this trance session. Technically, this is an act of psychometry, which is reading the energy history of a physical object.
And the critique of the stationery is just hilarious.
Seth notes the letter is written on school notepaper.
You know, the wide-ruled stuff you use in 3rd grade to practice your cursive letters.
Exactly that. And the handwriting perfectly mirrors the physical diagnosis we just went over. Seth calls it palsied and hard to read.
And the sentence structure. Seth critiques it, calling it simple, childlike.
It totally validates the personality profile. You have a highly educated man who is regressing, or perhaps his physical limitations, that marginal motor disturbance, are just forcing him into a simpler mode of expression. If you can't physically control your hand well, you write very short sentences.
There's also a really weird geography puzzle in this letter. Seth mentions the letter, it's from Indianapolis, but it was actually mailed from New York City.
Which adds a whole new layer of mystery. Why the disconnect there? It suggests a transient life, or maybe he has people helping him move his correspondence around. Seth mentions there is a woman close to him, a brotherly relationship of sorts, who helps tend to his wants.
So just to recap this psychic report on the old man. We have a 54-year-old, partially paralyzed guy with a left eye cataract, writing on children's school paper with shaky handwriting, running a spiritual school that's mostly empty, and mailing letters from cities he isn't even in.
And yet, despite all of that chaos, Seth insists he has legitimate psychic abilities.
It's the chilling aspect we mentioned right at the intro. It's not a spooky ghost story. It's the chilling accuracy of a life observed from a massive distance. It is a full medical diagnosis combined with an intimate biography delivered by a woman sitting in a trance who has never even met the guy.
And notice the complete lack of judgment. Seth isn't mocking him at all. He is just reporting the facts as he sees them. The jovial Jesuit gets a warm greeting, but this man just gets a clinical diagnosis.
But Seth doesn't linger on it. He doesn't pause and say, okay, did I get that right? Let's check the scorecard. He just abruptly moves on. He says, give us a moment, and then we shift gears completely.
We shift away from the letter writer entirely and move over to the brothers.
Now, the brothers are directly connected to the guests in the room, Bill and Peg Gallagher.
Correct. The Gallaghers are physically sitting there in Elmira, but the brothers in question are way out in California. And Seth immediately starts profiling them, completely blind.
He identifies the age gap first. He says there is exactly an 18-year difference between them, 54 and 36.
And he contrasts their personalities. One is extremely fastidious and restrained, and Seth is careful to clarify this fastidious one is not the letter writer we were just talking about.
Right, because the letter writer was the chaotic guy writing on the school paper. So we basically have the messy one and the neat one. It's the odd couple.
In a way, yeah. But then things get very, very strange. Up to this point, we have been talking about 1967 medical issues and quirky personality traits. Suddenly, Seth drops a sentence that acts like a trapdoor in time.
Oh man, the history jump. This is where my brain always starts to hurt a little bit.
Seth mentions a disastrous event connected with the family's past. He pinpoints the 1930s. He talks about a death, an aunt, and an unfamiliar location.
It's like he's just rapidly flipping through a photo album. One minute, he's looking at a cataract in 1967. The next, he's at a tragic funeral in the 1930s.
And he goes back even further. He says, fared in France, very approximately 1831, Versailles.
Wait, hold on. Versailles, like the palace in France.
The location, yes. He identifies a personality named Ferd. And he mentions a very specific historical detail, a trip in that French life to China.
So are we implying here that the brother in California, or maybe the letter writer, actually was Ferd back in 1831?
That is the direct implication of the Seth material regarding reincarnation, yes. But notice how casually the information is presented. It isn't this grand, booming revelation with thunder and lightning. It's just raw data. Left eye cataract, 1930s disaster, 1831 Versailles, trip to China.
It's all totally flattened out.
Precisely. And this brings us to a really core concept in the Seth material, simultaneous time.
Okay, we need to unpack this.
Yeah.
Because usually we all think of time as a straight line. The past is way back there, the future is up ahead.
Right. But Seth argues that time is actually more like a spacious room. Imagine you are standing in a giant living room. The armchair in the corner is 1831. The sofa is 1967. The floor lamp is 2026. They are all physically in the room at the exact same time. You just have to turn your head to look at them.
So when Seth sees Ferd in 1831, he isn't actually traveling back in a time machine. He's just, looking to his left?
Exactly. He is just shifting his focus. To Seth, the trip to China in 1831 is happening right now, just as much as the trance session in 1967 is happening right now.
That is such a heavy concept to grasp. Yeah. It means that while we are sitting here recording this deep dive, and while you are listening to this right now, Ferd is currently taking that boat to China in 1831.
In a manner of speaking, yes. All these potential realities exist at once, and Seth navigates between them totally effortlessly. But what happens next in the session is, in my opinion anyway, even more impressive than the time travel.
The space travel.
The remote viewing, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, let's set the scene for this part. We are still in that living room in Elmira, New York. It's getting late at night. Jane is deep in trance. And suddenly, the description just changes. We aren't looking at a person anymore. We aren't looking at France in the 1800s. We're looking at a physical place.
Seth begins to describe a house. And remember, the Gallaghers haven't shown him any photos. This is a completely blind reading.
And the details he gives, I like to call this the hit list because they are just direct hits. First, he says he sees a small yard. And what's growing in the yard? Lemons.
Quote, a small yard with lemons for the brothers.
That is so ridiculously specific. Not trees, not pretty flowers, lemons.
It's a profound sensory detail. It suggests he isn't just looking at a flat map. He's experiencing the actual environment. Lemons imply California or a similar warm climate. You definitely don't have lemon trees growing in your front yard in Elmira, New York.
No, definitely not in May. Then he describes the house itself, a pink stucco house.
Again, color and texture, pink stucco. That just screams West Coast or Southwest architecture.
He sees 2 bedrooms in the rear. He explicitly mentions it's not a new house. And he points out a peculiarity on the left side of the house.
And he actually goes inside the house. He sees a flight of stairs, but he adds this really interesting caveat. He says, though it does not seem to be a 2-family home. This is fascinating because he is actively interpreting the layout. Usually, seeing stairs might imply separate apartment units, but he senses it's just a single dwelling.
He even peeks right into their kitchen. He said they use the board in the kitchen. I have to assume he means a Ouija board, right?
That is definitely the most likely inference, yes. The Gallaghers and their wider circle were very interested in these things.
Imagine just being in your kitchen in California, maybe making a late-night sandwich. Absolutely no idea that a psychic consciousness from New York is watching you play with a Ouija board.
It raises some pretty serious questions about privacy, certainly. But Seth is much more focused on the architecture. He starts describing the spatial relationship between the houses. He sees a distinct space between the house and the next structure on the right. He places them near a corner, but, quote, not at the corner.
It's like he's trying to land a helicopter or something. He's really looking at the spacing. Okay, we got a gap on the right. We're near the corner.
But then he runs into a visual problem. And this is actually my favorite part of the entire session because it shows the actual mechanism of psychic perception. He gets really confused by a building.
Ah, the garage puzzle.
Exactly. He looks over to the left. He sees a building. He says it appears to be a garage, a private garage, but I do not believe that it is.
He's doubting his own vision.
He's doubting his own interpretation of the visual data he's receiving. He describes it as having a large square design at the front, like a garage or a large barn door or even a firehouse.
So he clearly sees the shape, the big square door, but the actual vibe of the building doesn't feel like a garage to him.
Correct. And this highlights that remote viewing isn't just watching a 4K camera feed. It's receiving a stream of symbols and impressions that the conscious mind, or the medium's mind in this case, has to constantly translate.
It's almost like the interpreter function in your brain. He sees big door, so his brain offers up labels: garage, firehouse, barn. But he inherently knows those labels aren't quite hitting the mark.
Precisely. If he just instantly said, oh, it is a detached studio apartment converted from a carport, it would feel a bit too scripted. The confusion makes it feel so much more authentic, like he is actually struggling to see it clearly. He is actively translating raw energy data into English words.
And then he just zooms out. He stops looking at the confusing garage and looks at the broader landscape. And I really want to read this quote from the session because it's so evocative. He says, "There are not many structures between them and the water. High grass for a while, and some wooden posts and wire. Sand dunes of a sort."
Sand dunes of a sort. There is that struggle to name the terrain again, but he definitively places them near water.
And this is where the session basically turns into an action movie. Bill Gallagher, who is sitting there in the room, probably holding his breath at this point, asks a direct question. He says, "Are you at the location now?"
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Is this just a memory you're reading, or are you actually there?
And Seth's answer is just great. He says, "To some degree. There, I have changed position."
I have changed position. That implies literal movement, volition in that space.
He says, "Now I am facing the house."
So he has rotated his entire perspective. Imagine a drone hovering in the air. He just spins 180 degrees.
He describes the new view.
Yeah.
Directly behind it, it seems clear of structures to the water.
He is actively building a 3D map in his mind. He notes the garage is now to his right. He sees structures leading down to the water. He sees the actual beach. And he notes a very transient specific detail. He says, the tide is in.
The tide is in. That is a verifiable physical fact for a specific time of day.
And Bill immediately checks the time. He asks, what time of day is it?
And Seth says, it is early evening, which completely makes sense. If it's 10:00 p.m. over in New York, it's 7 p.m. over in California, early evening.
Perfect alignment.
But Seth isn't quite done with the scenery yet. He gets fixated on these wooden posts he mentioned. He says, there are these fairly thin wooden posts, but not round, rectangular at the top, you see.
He's probably frowning, gesturing with Jane's physical hands while he says it. He's really trying to convey the specific shape.
And then he describes the coastline. This is the absolute kicker for me. He says, the coastline is not straight here. Some sort of a bay effect to the left, The land curves and juts out again.
A bay effect, a curve.
And Bill asks him, is your vantage point now from above?
And Seth replies, for the coastline information, though you can see this from the beach.
So he's just hopping all around the scene. He's at hip level looking closely at the posts, and then suddenly he's way up high looking at the macro curvature of the coastline.
It is a totally dynamic projection. He isn't stuck locked in one static viewpoint.
Now, we really have to talk about Jane here. Because while Seth is having this lovely evening stroll at the beach in California, Jane is just sitting in a rocking chair in upstate New York. What exactly is happening to her physical body during this?
This brings us to Section 4 of our deep dive, the Out-of-Body Experience Mechanics, or OBE.
The original notes from the session tell us that during this specific segment, right when Bill asked if he was at the location, Jane's physical sensation changed dramatically.
Yes, the transcript notes explicitly state that Jane felt bodiless.
Bodiless. That is a kind of terrifying word if you really think about it.
It implies a total dissociation from the physical form. She had absolutely no awareness of the room in Elmira.
So if a fire alarm went off in the house, would she even hear it?
In a trance that deep, quite possibly not. Her focus is entirely elsewhere. The notes say she felt suspended in air, but capable of movement.
Suspended in air, like she's just floating in a void.
But notice the careful distinction she makes later. She calls it a partial projection.
Why partial, though? If she's floating out in California, isn't that a full projection?
Not necessarily, according to their framework. She notes that only a vision operated. She wasn't smelling the salt air or feeling the wind on her skin or hearing the crash of the waves. She was purely seeing.
So it's kind of like watching a silent movie or looking through a remote security camera feed.
Exactly. If it were a full projection, all her physical senses would be fully engaged in that new location. But because it was visual only, she classifies it as partial. Yet she felt her consciousness physically, or I guess non-physically, move to answer Bill's questions. When Bill asked about the view behind the house, she felt she had to actually move to see it.
It totally implies that consciousness is inherently mobile. It's not just locked inside the skull. It can detach, travel, observe things, and report back, all in real time.
And now comes the crucial part, the verification. Because all of this is just a really cool sci-fi story, if it turns out the house is actually blue and sitting in the middle of a desert.
Right. We need the fact check. So did they actually check it out?
They absolutely did. The source notes confirm it. The Gallaghers hadn't actually checked any maps before the session. This was all from memory. But afterwards, they looked at detailed maps of Chula Vista, California.
What did they find?
Chula Vista is indeed situated right near a bay.
No.
And the coastline is emphatically not straight. It perfectly matches Seth's description of the curve and the land jutting out.
And what about the pink stucco house?
The geography, the bay effect, the sand dunes of a sort, the orientation to the water, all of it was completely accurate to the physical location of the brothers. And the highly specific details of the pink stucco and those lemons in the yard were details known to the Gallaghers about the brothers' residence. That confirmed the specific lock-on to the correct target.
That is just wild to me. You have a woman in Elmira, New York, who has never been there in her life, perfectly describing the curvature of the coast in Chula Vista, California in 1967. I mean, this is decades before Google Earth, before anyone had internet satellite view.
It strongly suggests that the mind has direct access to information that the physical brain does not. The brain is sitting in New York. The mind is observing in California.
Okay, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier. The humor of it all. We talked about hum-de-doo and the jovial Jesuit. But throughout this whole intense reality-breaking remote viewing session, was the vibe still relaxed?
It really seems so. The notes consistently mention that the atmosphere was very comfortable. Seth wasn't speaking in a booming, scary, theatrical voice. He was entirely conversational. Like, when he was describing the garage, he was almost puzzled, just like a friend trying to describe a weird building they saw on a road trip. He was like, well, it looks like a garage, but I don't really think it is.
It makes the supernatural feel completely natural. That's the biggest thing I take away from this session. It's not spooky magic. It's just mechanics. It's just how the universe actually works, according to Seth.
And that is a core theme running through the entire Seth material. Magic is just science we don't understand yet. The ability to project consciousness isn't some rare miracle. It's a completely natural attribute of the human soul that we have simply forgotten how to use in our modern lives.
Or I guess in the case of the old man letter writer, maybe we haven't forgotten, but we just can't quite control it. Remember, Seth said he had legitimate psychic abilities despite his disordered personality.
That's a really great point. The letter writer is a messy, broken vessel, but the psychic signal still comes through. Jane is a highly disciplined vessel, and the signal comes through crystal clearly. It suggests the signal is constantly broadcasting everywhere. It's just the receiver that varies from person to person.
I really love that analogy. We are all essentially radios. Some of us are just tuned to static. Some of us are high-fidelity stereos.
And some of us, like the letter writer, have a blown speaker and a loose wire hanging out, but we're still miraculously picking up the broadcast.
Right, exactly. Palsied handwriting, but still pulling down psychic data.
I do want to touch on the simultaneous time aspect one more time before we wrap up, because I think it's the absolute key to understanding how Seth operates across all these books.
Please do. It's honestly the hardest part to wrap your head around.
In our normal day-to-day lives, we see time as a strict line, past, present, future. To go from 1967 back to 1831, we feel like we have to hit rewind. To go from New York to California, we have to travel across distance.
Right. It takes distance and duration. It takes time to get there.
But in this session, Seth does both of those things instantly. He jumps 130 years into the past, and then he jumps 3,000 miles to the west. And he does it in the span of just a few sentences.
He doesn't say, hold on, guys, let me fuel up the time machine.
No, not at all. This strongly implies that from his perspective, from the perspective of this broader consciousness, everything's happening right now. The 1831 trip to China is happening right now. The brother sitting in the pink house in Chula Vista is sitting there right now. The letter writer is shaking his hand right now.
It's like looking at a giant map. New York and California both exist on the map at the exact same time. You don't have to create California out of thin air when you look at it. It's already there waiting.
Precisely. To Seth, time is just a vast landscape. He looks left, he clearly sees 1831. He looks right, he sees 1967. He looks down, he sees Chula Vista.
That just blows my mind. It makes you really wonder, if time is a physical landscape like that, can we actually learn to just walk around on it?
Seth would say yes, absolutely. That is the entire point of the training in the books. That is the point of doing this kind of deep dive into consciousness. It isn't just about reading funny letters or spying on pink houses. It's about realizing that we are residents of a much, much larger country than we ever thought.
So, to recap our wild journey today, we started with a hum-to-do. We medically diagnosed a 54-year-old man with a cataract and a tremor from afar. We analyzed his third-grade handwriting. We found out he used to be a guy named Ferret in 1831 France. Then we flew out of the window, crossed the entire continent, hovered over a pink stucco house in Chula Vista, saw some fresh lemons, got really confused by a weird garage door, and watched the tide come in at the bay.
All in a day's work for a typical Wednesday evening session in 1967.
And all while Jane Roberts sat completely still in a chair, feeling like she was just floating in the air.
It really is a remarkable historical document. It seamlessly combines the totally mundane, like the lemons and the cheap notepaper, with the incredibly profound.
And it leaves us with this incredible picture of a universe that is so much bigger and yet so much more intimate than we usually think.
It suggests we are never truly alone or isolated. We are deeply connected across time and space.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm definitely going to be looking at my garage a little bit differently today. Just wondering if anyone is floating above it right now, debating if it looks like a firehouse.
Always a possibility. Keep your eyes peeled.
Listen, if this deep dive sparked something in you, if you want to know more about the old man, the brothers Ferd, or just how Seth explains the actual nature of reality, you really need to go directly to the source.
We have honestly only scratched the surface of session 339 today. There are literally thousands of pages of this material. The sheer volume and consistency of the Seth material is staggering.
We want to give full credit where it's due. This material comes from the Seth material, specifically the early sessions, which is published by the New Awareness Network.
These books are dense. They are fascinating, and they are essentially required reading for anyone interested in the study of consciousness. You cannot really say you've studied the field without wrestling with Seth.
We strongly encourage you to study the Seth material books yourself. Really, don't just take our word for it. Don't rely solely on our summary. Go read the actual transcripts. You can find them and support the publisher by visiting the New Awareness Network website and bookstore.
That web address is sethcenter.com/early sessions.
Again, that's sethcenter.com/D-early-sessions. Go check it out. Fill up your bookshelf.
You really won't regret it. It's life-changing material.
But before we sign off today, I want to leave you with one final thought, just a little provocation for your brain.
Let's hear it.
We talked heavily about Jane feeling bodiless but still being able to clearly see and move around. We talked about her consciousness hovering over a house in California while her physical body sat relatively lifeless in a room in New York.
Yes.
So, if your consciousness, the actual part of you that sees, thinks, and experiences the world, can be 3,000 miles away from your physical body, and if it can be just as real there as it is here, what does that actually say about the true definition of being home?
It's a great question. Are we ever really in our bodies? Or do we just kind of haunt them?
Exactly. Are we the pilot sitting securely in the cockpit, or are we just the drone operator sitting in a bunker miles away?
That is the ultimate question.
Something to mull over while you look up at the stars tonight, or at the lemons in your yard. Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you in the next reality.